In this episode of No Stupid Questions, we're going to have a look at everything you need to know about working with audio in Premiere Pro CC. Now, I say everything, but I won't be covering 5.1 surround sound or mixing and sweetening of audio. Those are two completely separate topics that I want to cover on their own. Working with audio inside Premiere Pro is incredibly flexible, really powerful. And with the flood of users coming over from Final Cut and Avid Media Composer, I thought it would be a great idea to break this down. We're going to start and work in different sections. We'll begin by looking at importing, how to get your audio in. And we have some very important preferences to help you set how your camera audio is brought in. So each and every subsequent import is going to be the way you want it. Next, we're going to identify where things are. Where's the mixer, where the tracks, keyframes, meters, and how to work with those kinds of things. Next up, we'll talk about routing. We have some powerful adaptive tracks inside Premiere Pro that allow you to map things to different outputs and inputs, and we'll break that down for you. Next, I got a lot of help from my colleagues around the world on tips and tricks on specific workflows from their customers. So I want to send a shout out to my colleagues around the world, Matt Jives in the UK, Mikkel Gambach in Germany, and Saigo Furuta in Japan at Adobe, Max Hagelstam in Sweden, and someone outside of Adobe, Jarl Leopold, who, if you want to go to premierepro.net, he's got a ton of great resources there. So they helped me with some of these specific workflows. They said my customer needs to take a P2 camera and map it this way, or an XD cam with 8 channels and map it this way. So we're going to have a look at those. And then we'll finish with looking at output and how to go out to multi-channel audio, and specifically for Final Cut users who get mixed up with how do I get a ProRes output file with multi-channel audio. We'll cover all of that. So let's get started. Now, this is not a typical sequence that you've got inside here. I've got really quite a few windows organized differently, and that's mainly because, you know, I'm sitting here on a very small display, and I want to be able to show you the most important things while I'm working with audio inside Premiere Pro. Your version is going to look different. In the window menu workspaces, you can just change, go back to editing if you want. Here's editing, and that's what it looks like. I'm going to go back to my workspace for this audio demo. Remember, we can also sync our settings down in here. We can click and sync our settings in Creative Cloud. So what's the best way? Well, a lot of people will bring in files choosing File in Import. And they'll grab their files this way, or you'll drag and drop. I know Final Cut users are very fond of that, but you might miss the intelligence in files and metadata if you bring things in that way. It's much better to use the media browser. So I've got the media browser stuck over here, and I'll just jump over to a specific folder I have with a bunch of tapeless media in here, and I'll press the tilde key. That's the one just above the tab key, and allows me to see these files a little bit easier. So if I was going to be looking at this folder here, we understand certain folder structures like ARRI RAW, AVC HD, P2, Red, Sony, XD Cam, and such. Over top, if we move the mouse, we get a hover scrub view. We can click inside and hit move this around. I can also hit play and play on this. So if I wanted to play this back, I easily could. So that is a powerful way. And again, I could select, shift select a bunch of these, right click, choose import, open in the source monitor, and bring them in that way. Hit the tilde key and we're back inside. So lots of different ways to import, some you're familiar with, but I highly suggest you begin to use the media browser. When you bring your files in, and I've got this top area turned on in my project bin, and it's called the preview area. It might be turned off by default, but I've got it turned on right here. The reason I do is when I click on a file, I can see what's inside the file. This one is 48K. It's stereo mapped to mono, and I mapped this to mono for demonstration purposes to make this similar to a Final Cut workflow where I have one clip with 2 audio tracks, each one is mono. The next one is a stereo audio clip with video. This is an 8-channel, 24-bit, 8 mono channels inside here. What's important to note is that each one of these has certain characteristics, and it's really powerful if you know your workflow before you get started, because these were brought in as defaults. Let me show you where that is. In the Edit menu, Preferences Audio, or in the Premiere Pro menu on the Mac, Preferences Audio, you can see in here default audio tracks for mono, stereo, 5.1, a multi-channel. Now, we're not really going to be covering 5.1 media. I'm going to be doing a whole separate section on that because it does deserve its own. But here in mono media, you can see that we're by default using the file itself. But we could force this into stereo, or for whatever reason 5.1 or adaptive. Same with stereo. If you always like to use mono, select that, click OK. Now every single clip you bring in that has two audio tracks, they will always be mono. The same thing if you're bringing in files from P2 or XDCam. They'll now be a whole bunch of mono tracks. Or we can come down here and say adaptive. Anytime you have multi-channel mono, bring this in new as an adaptive track. So and there isn't one setting that's right or wrong. This is really up to you and your workflow. I'm just going to go back to using each file for my purposes, click OK. But let's say you just found that out and you're now looking at your project bin and you realize, oh, I should have changed all of these files to mono. Oh, don't worry. You can change them after they've been brought in. Just right click on a file, choose Modify, Audio Channels, and make the choices in here. You can see I've got this set up as 2 mono tracks. I could set this up as 1 stereo track if I wanted to, or I could set it up as an adaptive track with 2 tracks that are set to adaptive, and I'll show you the benefit of those in a bit. You can also save your presets inside, so if there's a certain setting that you like, you can show up. You can even add tracks in here, so I can go to 4 mono tracks in here, and there aren't even 4 tracks in here, but I've basically just made 2 extra tracks. Again, I'll show you some workflows with P2 and XDCam to remove unwanted tracks. So I'm going to leave that one. I'm just going to cancel out of that and leave that. This is really good and powerful. If I had 100 of these to change, I could select 100 of them and right click and choose to modify the audio. But remember, when you're changing multiple files, choose the same formats. Don't choose some that are mono and some that are stereo and some that are 8-channel and expect that to work. Choose the specific formats that you want to change. But if you remember in importing, if you have the right settings set up first, you're not going to have to change that. I can modify these at any time with one really important thing to consider, and that is if this clip is already in a timeline and I modify the mapping of the tracks, it won't change if it's in a current sequence. It will only change if you put it in other sequences. So you could actually put it in as 2 mono, go back, change it to stereo, and put it in again as a stereo file if that's something you want to do. But just remember, it won't go in and change each one of those. Okay, so that's really importing. That means our files are in here where we've got them set up correctly. Now let's look at where are things inside here. So we've been working in the project bin over here in the media browser. Down in the bottom is our timeline, and I'm just going to create a quick timeline in here just so we have one. We've got our video and our audio tracks inside here. If I use my scroll wheel on the header of this track, I can make it bigger, and you can see that this is a stereo track. And when I hit play, my meters are showing up over here on the right. And I've actually customized this. You can either click in here and choose Customize Audio Header, or I can choose Customize in here. And I've dropped in the track meter and the track volume. And I can also reset my layout if I wanted to. So this gives me these little meters in here. The track does have to be large enough. It has to be open enough for you to see those. So if it's closed down, you're not going to see them. If I want to open all the tracks at the same time, hold the Shift key and use the scroll wheel, and you'll open each one of them. And if I hit the Tab key and do that, holy smokes, I can quickly jump to a full screen view of all of this and still see my meters without having to go and grab a mixer and see that. So down at the bottom is my master track. And when you make a sequence, and I made this automatically, when you make a sequence, you have to choose what the master track is. Now, I'm going to assume most people are going to be using multi-channel master. So this is a stereo master, and you can see that from these two little icons facing left and right. But you can have mono, you can have stereo 5.1. But I'm primarily going to be looking at multi-channel masters. All right, what about the waveforms? Well, these waveforms, the default that you will have are these rectified audio waveforms, and that's what they look like. If you like these, great. If you like these, turn that rectified audio waveform. These are kind of like the old school ones. The rectified ones do have some use, especially in low noise floor cases. You'll see a lot more information down here than if you have the rectified turned off. It's just we want to give you the best of both worlds. Also, when you double click on a clip and it's loaded into the source monitor, down at the bottom of the source monitor, you can actually click on this audio waveform and you can see the audio waveform, and I can actually drag through inside. I could be setting in and out points in here if I wanted to. So this is just a different way to look at an audio video clip while I'm working with it. Maybe I'm actually setting the in and out points with dialogue and I want to see the waveform as I'm doing that. So great way to turn that on and off inside the source monitor. So here's another one. Let's zoom in here. I'm going to open this up and make this bigger. And as I zoom in, you can see typically in a nonlinear editor, I'm zoomed into one frame at a time. But if I need more accuracy, I can actually click in the little flyout menu and I can show audio time units. This is turned off by default because most editors are going to work in a frame-based workflow. But I'm hitting the plus key all the way down to one cycle inside here. So if I actually go to something with a little bit more volume, like this area in here, and we zoom in, you can see we're actually going down and we can see individual cycles in here. You could actually set keyframes for the rubber band. So I could be setting the automation keyframes at that sample level. So if I needed to take a click or a pop or an or something out, really simply, I could just drag that down. Okay. And you'll notice down here, when I open this up, I have this line here, which is going to allow me to add keyframes. And over on the left-hand side, this is my track mixer. This is the clip mixer. In the window menu, you can get to either the audio clip mixer or the track mixer right here. And with the track mixer, you can see that I can use automation here, automatically read and write, touch and write, use control surfaces. Over on the right-hand side, if I hold the control key down and click, I can add a keyframe. Notice we also have a pen tool, and I can use the pen tool. If I'm going to be working in here a lot, then I'll just grab the pen tool, and in here I can click and drag. I'm holding down the control key or the command key on the Mac, and I can change these into Bezier curves if I want to. Go back to the move tool, click and move these around. If you want to select more than one, the pen tool actually allows you to range select those. So I can select all of those, then get the move tool, and then move all of those around at the same time. And if I go in here and look at the clip keyframes and go to the audio clip mixer, I can either do them manually or I can move this around in here. By clicking on this button right here, I'm adding a keyframe and I can move that around, and you can see that I'm creating automation inside there. And now when I go around, you'll see that it's moving to follow that automation in those keyframes. I can also use the pen tool just like the track keyframes. Click in here and add points. Click in here and move that point around, again with the pen tool, holding down the control key on Windows, command on the Mac, and move this around and add Bezier curves. I can also use the same tool, this is the pen tool, to range select. So I'm dragging around all of these and then moving them all around at the same time. And you can see that it's automating right now. It's automating this particular control, but if I wanted to automate the individual left and right, clicking inside that little FX area, volume, right now we're seeing level, channel volume, left. So I will be adding a keyframe for left. And let's move this over here, move that over. Now the left value is moving. So I can only look at one of these at the same time in here. Now, right now, as I mentioned, I'm looking at a smaller view. So if I just go back to my Windows and Workspace, and I'm going to go back to reset my, this is like the default setting in Premiere Pro. I just want to show you that in the effects controls here, when I click on this clip, on the right hand side, I can see my keyframes for volume and panning and channel volume and all of those directly inside here. So remember, if I hit the tilde key and move that up, I'm now looking at a much larger view, and it's a lot easier to make selections in here, and I can move all of these keyframes or just select one group of keyframes, and you can jump to and from each one of those. So this might be a better view for some people if they are working in a very detailed view. So I keep mentioning the tilde key, and I should mention that the tilde key, which is the little squiggle key above the tab key for North American keyboards, this will be a different keyboard shortcut in different languages. One of the reasons that people like these track keyframes, the clip keyframes, is I can click and I can move this, and you can see that the automation is actually moving with the clip. Really nice. If I go back over to track keyframes, the clip keyframes are not gone. They're just temporarily hidden as I'm moving this around. So I'm looking at the track keyframes, and you can see my automation has not moved along with this. This is something that definitely will take you by surprise. These keyframes here are track keyframes, and they do not move with the clip at all. So if I select this clip, and by the way, if you're trying to move an audio clip with the Move tool, and you have track keyframes selected, the only way to do this is to use the keyboard shortcuts. This is Alt or Option on the Mac plus Shift to move that around. You'll notice that the clip is moving, but the automation is not moving. So two really important ways to add automation: clip keyframes and track keyframes. They're both very useful, but you have to use the right one to get the right results. Now let's talk about routing things. So I've shown you making clips, sequences quickly. I'm going to go to the new item and create a new sequence. Now, I don't really care about audio or video codecs inside here, so I'm going to jump right to my tracks, and I'm going to set my video to one track. And this is where you can create a multi-channel master. Very important here. Down here are the tracks in the sequence. This is the master. So I'm going to create an 8 multi-channel master. And the first track is going to be standard. The second track is going to be mono. The third track I'm going to show you adaptive. And the fourth one I'm just going to delete inside here. Some other controls inside, of course, being able to balance this. A standard track going to 8 outputs. If I click in here and assign, I can set where this goes. So if I don't want it to go to 1 and 2, I want it to go to 7 and 8, I can select that. I can select 1 and 2 and 7 and 8 and 13 and 14 or whatever have you. Remember, if I'm at 13 and 14, this is only going to 8, so you're not even going to hear that. So I'm going to leave that at 1 and 2. Same with mono. When I click in here, I'm mapping these to stereo outputs. Now there's no assignment over here on the right-hand side. This is where the assignment is for an adaptive track. So if I click inside here, I can now map track 1 to a different track. So maybe I'm going from 8 to 5. So I can actually map, let's map 6 to 5. 7, we'll get rid of that and do that as 5. Oh, you can see I'm already making a mess here. 5, get rid of 6. 7 goes to 5 alone, and 8 goes to 5, and I'll turn off 8. And you got to turn off each one of those back here, accidentally turned on 4. Okay, now you can see output 1 to 5 is going to its respective outputs. 6, 7, and 8 are all going to 5. So that's one particular way to remap those. And we can also do that after we create the sequence. I'll show you where that is. I'll click OK. Remember, we can save this as a preset. So if I click here, I can name this. Chances are, if you're in broadcast, you're going to be doing the same kinds of things, or maybe a dozen different types of things all the time. So make sure you, after you go through all of that, you actually save that as a preset. Click OK, and there is my sequence. And what's really important to note is we do give you indicators. So up to this point, we've been looking at standard tracks, and standard tracks don't have any indicators. That means it's a standard track. Here's a mono track. It has one speaker facing to the right. Here's an adaptive track. Oh, remember that mapping that we showed you? When I click inside here, there's the mapping. So if I needed to change that after the fact, I can do that. Here's my master track, and you can see a number 8 in there. And if I click inside, I can change and remap that, or add a larger number of masters. What's important is if I have 32 channels and I have something mapped to 32, if I make this 8, whatever I had on 32 is still at 32. So I have to manually go back and map that. So I'm going to go back over here. This is my track mixer, and remember I was showing you remapping each one of these. So this is audio 1. Look at this button right here, audio 1, click, and that opens up the same dialog box so I can reassign those pairs. Same with the mono track, click in here, reassign those, and there is the output mapping for the adaptive track. Now, what can you put in an adaptive track, in a stereo track, in a mono track? Well, just as you would expect, let me just turn off my preview area to give myself some room up here. Here's the stereo track, and if I drag that in, I'm going to drag that into my stereo track, and I've got stereo inside there. Great. What about my mono clip? Well, let me find my mono clip. There's my mono clip into mono. What can we put in adaptive? Everything. Check this out. Here's mono, and here's stereo, and remember that 8 channel, and here's the 8 channel inside there. Oops, notice what happened. My 8 channels came into 8 monos. Oh, undo. Let me go back and click on this. Modify audio channels. Oh, it's wrong. This should be an instant indicator to you. I was trying to stick 8 channels into an adaptive track and it came in as 8 mono, and maybe that's what you want, but that's not what I want. I want one track with all of those clips. Okay, let me change this to 1 adaptive track, and there we go, 1 to 8. Click OK, drag the 8 into there. There we go. And then when you look at this, here's the other thing is you'll look at this, and remember I'm on a tiny screen here. You'll say, how come I can see my mono, I can see my stereo, I can't see my 8 multi-channel? Well, if you open it up a little bit more, then we can finally see it. And I hit play. All right, there's my mono track, and you can see it's playing out to left and right stereo. Here's my stereo track playing out to left and right, 1 and 2 actually. And then my 8 channel is playing out to all of those 8 channels. Here's something interesting in the meters. Right now you're looking at stereo pairs. If you right click inside the meters, you can change this to mono channels. And we also have solo. We have solo for stereo or for mono. So if I click in here, I can just solo that track. And if we go back over to here, I can solo that track and just go back to my beginning of that 8 channel. And now you can only hear that one particular track as I've got that going on. You'll also notice over here on the left-hand side, my adaptive track is set automatically to 8. It gets set to the amount of tracks that the master track is. So if I change my master track to 4, you can see the adaptive track changes also. And it really makes sense to leave these things alone, to kind of be forward thinking and set up your sequences properly and not go in here and willy-nilly start, like restricting channels. Remapping's not a problem, but you should really pick that master out and just leave that alone. Remember, we're here with a multi-channel master of 8, but I could easily make that a multi-channel master of 2 if I wanted, and still might give myself some remapping. Okay. So let's now talk about, oh yeah, there's another thing I wanted to show you, and that was relinking files. Let me just delete all of these in here. By default, oh yeah, here's another tip. So full of tips. I'm dragging in my stereo track, and you can see that sometimes my audio track is not in the right place, and sometimes it jumps up. We've got a little keyboard shortcut. If I hold my shift key down, now that I've got my video in V1, or maybe I wanted it in V2, whenever your video track lands in the correct space, hold the shift key down, and now you can move the audio track of wherever you want it before you let it go. Sometimes you might be trying to force something in and you're wondering, how come I can't get that after the fact? Well, now you can. When you click on a video and audio track, they're automatically linked. And by the way, we've added this global unlinking selection in here. But what I want to show you really quick is if you hold Alt on Windows, Option on Mac, you can quickly just come in here and select just the audio track. So if I wanted to do that to the video, Alt, Option, click, hit delete, and I've just removed the video track out of there. So don't think that you have to click unlink, select, delete, and relink. Option, Alt, temporarily just selects that one piece. And if I was range selecting this too, I could be dragging a whole bunch of audio or video tracks and deleting those. So that is a nice little tip to know. Okay, let's talk about creating another sequence. And again, this is very typical. I hear this one all the time. I'm going to have also a multi-channel master of 8 out. I'm also going to choose, for this particular file, I want 2 standard tracks, and I'll delete the rest. So there's my 2 standard tracks, and I will click OK, and that is sequence 14. So let me just call that P2. That's my P2 sequence. And now when I bring in my P2 file, so you'll notice that my P2 file actually has a bunch of tracks in here. What I'm going to do is modify this, go to audio channels, and I'm going to change this to 2 mono channels. So even though this P2 file actually had 4 when it came in, a lot of times you have 4 channels, 4 tracks on this clip, and the first 2 are used, the last 2 are unused, and you end up having to delete them. Well, this way I don't have to. Click OK, and now when I take this P2 inside here, you see it's going to show up. It's going to warn me that my settings are mismatched, and you notice that I can say always ask or change settings or keep existing settings. Because we can work with native media and we can actually force something into a sequence that might be a little bit different than the sequence settings, I just wanted to leave that as is. It's probably warning me my video is different. But now when I open this up, you can see I've got 2 standard tracks. Remember, our standard tracks are stereo tracks. So over here on the left-hand side, I could hard pan these left and right, and I could hit play, and I could be outputting these files accordingly. Now, the second track here has actually got nothing on it, but if it did have something, you would see something in that second output. So 2 stereo tracks with 2 mono inputs that I can completely control, pan and audio. That's one that we get a lot. Here's another one. Let me grab another sequence. And for this particular one, I'm also going to go back to multi-channel. I'll do 8 outputs on this one, and I'm actually going to delete all of these, and I'll create 2 because I want to show you a great tip. So I've got a standard, and I'll name this one stereo, and I'll name this one mono, just so you know. And again, you're doing this a lot. Save the sequence, and I'll call this XD cam. And down at the bottom, you can see we get our little mono speaker. We have nothing here because that's a standard, and there's our 8 channel here. Now, here's my XD cam file. And when I double click on this and look at the audio, you can see I get 8 channels of audio in this particular file. So there's 8 mono channels in here. If I drag this down, now remember I said hold the shift key down. The shift key is locking my video to V1. if the first track is on a standard track and I let go, I'm just going to say stop asking me that. Notice that it made a whole bunch of standard tracks for me. Well, what if I actually wanted it to make a whole bunch of mono tracks for me? Does that mean that I have to start with a mono track? Because maybe sometimes I don't have that. I'm going to undo, show you a little tip. I'll drag this in, I lock my video to V1, and watch. I'm going to make my first audio track actually start on the mono track. Boom, and it makes a bunch of mono tracks for me. Now, of course, in the sequence settings, I probably should have said 8 mono tracks. Now I've got 8 mono tracks. There it is, shows up, 8 mono tracks showing up. Now, these tracks don't really have anything in them to show up in the rest of the meters over here on the right-hand side. So that's an XD cam with 8 mono. What if I want an XD cam with one 8-channel adaptive track? No problem. I'll come back and go to my sequences, just like before. I'll create multi-channel 8 out. Get rid of these 3 and choose one adaptive track. I'll name this adaptive. Click OK. I'll go back to my P2 or my XD cam file, modify the audio channels, and this time have one adaptive track with 8 tracks in it. Again, it's warning me that this is only for new sequences where I place this in. So I'll place that in there and I'll open this up. I'll hit play and there you go. Now I have 8 channels inside here in one track to control. Now, when we go over to the audio clip mixer and I hit play, your first thought might be, well, where can I control all 8 individual levels inside here? Well, if I right click and choose show channel volume, boing, guess what? I can now show channel volume for all of these files. Oh my goodness. And if we were at the clip keyframes, I could actually be showing the clip keyframes in here. So in this little FX, I could be showing the channel volume for each one of those, or the panner volume. So if I wanted to show channel volume 1, I could actually be controlling that keyframe there. So you see how channel volume 1 is moving up and down, and I could also be doing the overall volume, and I could be doing the audio track mixer volume on top of this. So I can understand why some people are like, holy smokes, I have got the kitchen sink in terms of working with audio in here. What do I use? Well, in typical Adobe fashion, we give you a lot of features and we really let you decide. So there is not one version of one recommendation that's going to be right for everyone. Depending if you come from film or from broadcast or indie work or what have you, yours changes, your settings, your audio is going to be completely up to you. Okay, so now we're starting to learn a little bit about adaptive tracks. Here's something that trips up Final Cut users all the time. They have my stereo file with 2 mono. So I'm mapped to 2 mono files as I showed you up here. And when I bring this into 2 adaptive tracks, so if I bring this down, remember this is not multi-channel into adaptive, this is mono. So it's going to make a second mono track for me. If I click on my mapping, output 1 is mapped to 1 up here, and output 2 is mapped to 2. That makes perfect sense. But when I hit play, you'll see that when we're listening to 2, and I'm going to go over here and look at my mono channels, solo 2, and listen, silence. Why is that? Well, we need to go to the adaptive 2, and we need to map 1 to 2 and turn off 1, click OK, and now 1 is 1, 1 is 2 inside here. Remember, this is a mono track that we're bringing inside here. So this is an easy one to get mixed up on, but if you follow those guidelines, it will fix that for you. All right, let's talk about extracting files. Now I'm just going to open up my project bin, and here I've got my stereo clip with 2 stereo files. What if I needed to extract the audio outside of there? I can select the clip, go to clip, audio options, break into mono, or extract the audio. And if I choose break out to mono, you can see I've got my stereo left and stereo right. It's actually extracted those files. It hasn't deleted them from the video clip, but it's extracted them out. Nice. Or I can also select the clip, audio options, and extract the audio out. This is actually a new file. And you notice that I got a dialog box. And if we reveal this in Explorer or in the Finder, you can see it's actually made new files for each one of those files. So they have to exist somewhere. So every single time it does that, it actually creates those new files. It just so happens to be so fast sometimes you don't even get a dialog box. Next up is fill left, fill right. Oh boy, this is a lot of fun. So let me go in and I'm going to add a simple, I'm going to come and add one, let me zero video, I'm going to make it before the first track, one standard track, click OK. And by the way, I can delete tracks, delete empty tracks, click OK, boom. Now I've deleted it. Now I've got my one stereo track inside here. Remember, I've got this guy, he's a stereo track. I'm going to make a problem file. So audio channels, and this is going to be stereo, and the right one is going to be none. Click OK, and notice I have only one track. If I drag this in here in my stereo track, I really have a left channel only. And this is really typical when you're recording from lavalier microphone. You're recording one channel to a camera, and you're only getting the left or the right channel, and you want to choose fill left, fill right. This is the left channel, so I'm going to go to my effects and I'll type in fill, and you get fill left and fill right. And the way that I remember this, because if you choose the wrong one, if it's empty from one, it'll make it empty in the other one. You want to fill from one. So I think of this as fill from the left, not fill into the left, fill from the left. So right now, if I hit play, I only have the left. Drop this effect in here, hit play again, fill from the left to the right. It's duplicating it on both sides. Sometimes you want that. I just wanted to show you where that was. And by the way, back in our mixers in here, if I twirl this down and we look inside, we can see a ton of amazing effects. Some of them by the great folks at Isotope. We've got compressors and limiters inside here. We've got delays and echo, filters, parametric EQs, flangers, noise reduction, reverb, and we support VST effects inside here. So we've got lots of control that way, as I mentioned. Sometimes you need to go out to a full-fledged audio editing program. And we can do that in the edit menu, edit in Adobe Audition. And I can choose a whole sequence, or I can set a clip and send that out and render and replace. So that's a very valid workflow. If I wanted to go to Pro Tools and I have adaptive tracks, I can export these out to Pro Tools and go out. It's going to take adaptive tracks, which obviously Pro Tools doesn't know. Even Audition doesn't understand that. It will actually set to a bunch of mono tracks. So you can do export out to OMF. The only thing to consider is that if you have an adaptive track with two channels, 1 and 2, and your master is set to 32, you're going to get 30 tracks of nothing. You can delete those easily, but that's what you'll finally see when it exports out. So a good recommendation is, if you are going to stay within Premiere Pro, adaptive tracks are extremely powerful in their remapping capability. If you think you're going to go back and forth between Pro Tools using OMF or to Audition, it's much better to use mono tracks. That really is a good way to work. But like I said, we do map adaptive out to separate mono tracks when we're going out. The OMF out of Premiere Pro is pretty good. The OMF out of Audition is crazy amazing. So if I was asked by someone, I'm the editor, and somebody said, look, we've got to send this out to OMF, I would be working with mono. I would go to edit in Audition, sequence, and I would send this out to Audition, and then from there I would export out an OMF. That really is a good workflow for that. All right, another thing I wanted to show you, and this is just a simple thing. I'm going to unlink my clips and move them out of sync. If you right-click on that indicator, you can choose to move in sync or slip into sync. Slip is not available because I really don't have enough video to slip. I'm at the beginning of that, but I can move it into sync, and you can see it moved it over to where my audio clip is. So if you accidentally click and move something out, you can set it into sync, or you can force it as an offset. Let's say that for some reason somebody gave you something that is 2 or 3 frames out of sync. You could nudge it over and actually see the amount of frames that you're out of sync. All right, this next workflow comes from Saigo Furuta, and this one deals with a 8-channel file. So this is a typical XD-cam file, HD, with 8 mono channels set up here. So with 8 mono channels, when we drop this in to here, the audio channels are 8 mono channels brought in. And in this particular example, we only need 1 to 5, and we're not using the rest of the channels. And this is more about mapping down here than routing them in the actual file. So we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tracks with this dropped in, and they're all stereo tracks. And over here we've got a 4-channel multi-channel output. What's important over here, I'm just going to hit the tilde key or the maximize frame key, and on the left hand side it's important that these are mono channels. When I click on the mapping, it's mapped to 1 and 2, but it's panned over here to the extreme left. That means this audio channel will only be going to 1. This one goes to 2 because it's panned to the right. This one is on 3 and 4, panned left, so it's only going to 3. This one panned right, only going to 4. And audio 5 is also going out to 4, panned right. So that is one specific workflow. Another one is really common, and that has to do with a camera file, or a camera with audio. So really typical. Got 4 channels in a camera, and we've got the camera microphone in stereo on 1 and 2, and then 2 lavalier microphones each on 3 and 4. So this is the way to, well, one way to map this. So if we look at how we've modified the clip, we have 3 audio tracks. Now we can't mix stereo and mono here, but we have 3 adaptive tracks. And each one has 2 tracks per channel, or 2 channels per track. So in here we've got channel 1 and 2, which is our stereo file for the camera. And for the first lav, we have channel 3, and this one is turned to none. Over here we're on channel 4 and none. So if we drop this in to our file, we can see what we've got. There is our stereo camera audio. There's one lav in mono. There's the other lav in mono. So those are 2 separate workflows. Just in case you happen to be working with those kinds of files, that might be something that you would like to set up for those workflows. I jumped over to my Mac to show you output. Reason being is I want to show you ProRes solutions, and that's why I'm on my Mac. Okay, so what's important to remember here is there's 2 things you got to get right: the sequence and the format you're exporting to. We can't change a format's option. So if you happen to be trying to go into a format that doesn't support multi-channel audio, we can't do it because that format can't do it. So make sure these steps are followed and you'll be able to get that out. So primarily going to be doing multi-channel audio. If it's just stereo, then that's a piece of cake. But I'll show you where this is going to trip us up if we're stereo going to multi-channel audio. All right, let's go have a look. So in this particular sequence, down at the bottom, you can see my 2 little stereo icons there. That means I have a stereo track. So File, Export to Media, and we can do this to Command-M, Control-M on Windows. And from here, I can export out, but I also want to show you that there's our OMF export, and we can send this out either the complete files or the trimmed files, and you can put handles on those. You can encapsulate or separate them. You can set the bits, and you can set the overall sample rate and export it out. You can also go to AAF, but if you're trying to go out to OMF, then as I said, this is my solution that I would suggest, is that you work in a completely mono format, all tracks mono when you're creating them, and break out sequences stereo into mono, and then edit in Adobe Audition, and then go out to OMF from Audition. You don't have to use Audition for anything other than an intermediary area to get from Premiere Pro out to Pro Tools. But let's get back to where we are going, out to Media. File, Export, Media. Remember, this is a stereo file, so I will choose QuickTime. I'll go over to my codec. I will choose ProRes 422. I'll go to Audio, and I'll look for multi-channel. Oh, there's a single track here, Audio Layout. Where's multi-channel out? Well, this is a stereo sequence. So you either have to copy and paste this into a new sequence, or just remember to make a new sequence. And remember, you can save a preset. So create a sequence and call it my multi-channel output ProRes sequence. So let's cancel out of here, go back to this sequence, and you'll notice down here the number 8. Remember, when you're creating a new sequence, so I can click on the new item icon down here, or go to File, New Sequence, Tracks, not stereo, multi-channel, how many? 8. Start with that, okay? Now when I go back to that same place, File, Export, Media, QuickTime, Video, ProRes, Audio, and you'll see there they are. Yay! See what I mean? Little bit of steps at the beginning is going to get you to these steps here at the end. So if you come up with something you like in here like this, so we'll go to our 8 channels and our QuickTime 422, and of course I could make this 1920 by 1080, and go back to square pixels. 1920, let's try that again. And turn that off. 1080, 23976, progressive, square pixels, 8 channels. I'll go up to this button right here and save this preset. So I'll call this one ProRes HQ 8 channel. Click OK, and I'm ready to go. Now when I queue this, I can export this out, but if I queue this out, it's going to launch Media Encoder, and I could save my preferences in here if I wanted to drag and drop those preferences. So that's going out to that. But if we go back to this stereo sequence and you say, hey, I've got my preset set up, you go to Media, you go to QuickTime, you go to your preset, and look at down here. We can't change this because it is a stereo track. This preset is just a way to set things down here. This won't warn you if you cannot make an 8 channel. So you again have to start. This is just a nice little convenience to have. Now if we want to go out to a camera format, here's MXF OP1A, and here's a bunch of XD cams down here. So let's do XD cam HD, and we'll do this as 24p, and look, there we've got our multi-channel out. Yay! Remember, it's got to be the right format to be able to get these channels, and that particular format supports it. Same with P2, P2 movie, audio, click, 4 or 8 channels. So I hope that helps you understand some of the important parts of working with audio in Premiere Pro CC. Like I said, incredibly flexible, very powerful, but you've got to create your own workflow to make it work for the way you need.